Hi everyone, Shabbat Shalom. What an unbelievable parasha. We could discuss so many things, but I want to focus here on the story of Dinah. The Torah tells us that Dinah went out to see the people of the land. She wanted to meet people. Who finds her? Shechem, the son of Hamor. Shechem takes her, rapes her, and then asks her hand in marriage. Imagine the chutzpah. Shechem really is the first terrorist. And what's going on here? Our sages tell us, you know why this happened? Yaakov, our forefather, was punished. You know why? Because he hid Dinah and did not allow for her to get married to Esav. Because, she could have changed him. She could have made him into a different person, a better person. And because he didn't do this, that's the reason why Dinah instead had to suffer this fate. Not a very palatable interpretation, to say the least. First of all, why should we assume that Dinah would have been able to influence Esav and made him a better person? Could be that the opposite would have happened. It could be that Esav would have influenced Dinah and would have actually had a negative impact on her. We find a great sage by the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, one of the foremost disciples of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach leaves and goes to a city where the spiritual standards were sort of lacking, and he fell. He experienced a spiritual decline. So we see that sometimes, you can be a tzaddik gamur, an upright, perfect individual, and yet, if you're surrounded by the wrong people, you get influenced. So why should we blame Yaakov for doing everything he could to keep Dinah away from Esav? It seems that he made the right call after all. The Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory shares an unbelievable insight on the story. And you can see in that insight how, in fact, the Torah says to us that our entire life is kind of folded into the story. Let's look a little bit into who is the mother of Dinah, Leah. The Torah tells us in the previous parasha, that Rachel was the Yefat Toar Vifat Mareh. She was perfect and beautiful in every way. But Ve'enei Leah Rakot, the eyes of Leah were tender, which seems to imply she wasn't as beautiful and good looking as Rachel, which is not nice to share about another person. Why would you want to say this? Why would the Torah want to tell me something that's not so nice about another person? We know the Torah almost never does that. So why make an exception here with Leah? And of course, our sages tell us that, in fact, it's quite the contrary. The Torah is trying to tell you that Leah knew that she was meant to get married to Esav because she was the eldest daughter. Esav was the eldest brother. And Rachel was meant to get married to Yaakov. And she didn't accept that fate. She cried and cried until her eyelashes fell. That's why her eyes were tender, so to speak. And really, Leah is the person that struggles and doesn't take no for an answer. She takes a problem and she turns it into a solution. That is Leah. You look at Leah's children, one by one. You have the story of Reuven, which is told to us in this parasha. Reuven, the impulsive fellow. What does he do? He's upset that Yaakov takes his bed and now puts it in the tent of Bilhah, who is the servant of Rachel, his main wife. He's so upset that he takes away the bed of Yaakov from the tent of Bilhah and puts it in the tent of Leah, because he feels outraged. He realized he made a mistake, and he becomes the first Baal Teshuvah. He repents for the full heart. You look at the story of Yehuda and Tamar, same story. At the end of the day, he owned up. At the end of the day, he realized he made a mistake. And the message here is that Yehuda learns from his mother. We're not meant to always be perfect and beautiful. We'll never be perfect, but we can be fixers. We can fix a broken, fragmented situation. This is really what Hashem derives nachat from. Hashem loves it when we try to rectify a problem, where we try to take a weakness and turn it into a new light, into an asset. And that is, if you look, the story of all the children of Leah. Look at the story of Yehuda and Benjamin. Yehuda takes responsibility for Benjamin. He takes all the responsibility. He may have made a mistake, but he tries to make good. And so now we understand a bit better what happened there with Dinah. Dinah could have made Esav understand something very simple but very powerful. She could have got married to Esav. And then while married to Esav, she could have said to him, my dear husband, you are the master of struggling, and you will be the master of resolving, of fixing. She could have made him understand that he's not made to fail, that his shortcomings can be overcome. She could have made him understand that very simple truth. In the tradition of Leah, the idea that very often, most of us, most human beings will never attain perfection. And maybe that's not what Hashem desires, what Hashem wants. He wants from us that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. That's all. To try to do our best to improve and to become better people. But you see, Yaakov, he didn't see it this way. Yaakov wanted everyone to be like Rachel. Rachel was his main wife. He wanted standards of perfection, of absolute beauty. That's what he desired for himself and his family. And you see, at the end, you find something really incredible. Yaakov asks to be buried with who? With Leah in the Ma'arat HaMachpelah. He doesn't ask to be buried next to Rachel, but next to Leah, because he understands at the end of the day, ultimately, Leah is really the unfolding of the destiny of the Jewish people. He understands her contribution. And that's really, in a nutshell, what's going on here with the story of Dinah. And we find, just an added little note here, we find that all the greatness of the Jewish people ultimately came from Leah. It didn't come from Rachel, unfortunately. Although Yosef and Binyamin themselves were perfect tzaddikim, but true greatness came from the children of Leah. You look at Yehuda. Yehuda is the precursor of royalty, the one who brought all the kings of the Jewish people. The Kehuna, the priesthood, the Leviah, all the Levites came, of course, from Levi. All the great leaders of Am Yisrael came from the children of Leah, many of them. And so, kingship, David HaMelech, our righteous Messiah, the Melech HaMashiach, of course, is issued of the Davidic dynasty through King Solomon. And Issachar symbolizes the greatness of Torah, learning Torah. And that's ultimately what Yaakov understood, that greatness is achieved only when you go through sometimes the deepest struggles. This Shabbat happens to also be Yutet Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, which is the day when the Alter Rebbe, the Admor HaZaken, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, the Chabad philosophy, was redeemed from prison. He authored a book called the Tanya. The Tanya basically is, you might say, almost like the Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah of Hasidic philosophy, of Chabad Hasidic philosophy. And that book basically was revolutionary at the time. When the famed Barditchev Rebbe, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, saw this book, he said it's amazing how the Admor HaZaken managed to take such a big God and put him in such a small book. And of course the question is, what does it mean that the book is a small book and therefore Hashem, who is such a great God, couldn't possibly fit? It's a great wonder that he made him fit into that small book. What does it mean? And so I believe that what the Barditchev Rebbe meant with the statement is that in this book, the Alter Rebbe, the Admor HaZaken, made us understand a simple truth, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, is found in the small places. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found in a place where we might experience despair, where we might experience the greatest difficulty. But this is where the Shekhinah is, this is where the divine presence is. Because ultimately, our neshamot, our souls, are meant to rectify a reality that is often broken at the core. We aspire and strive for perfection, but we also know that perfection, beauty, is elusive. We need to look inward, and this is what we find in the Tanya. The idea that you might struggle your entire life, but that you're in control of your thought, speech, and deed, and that you can actually change your life from one extreme to the next, that you're not a prisoner of your weaknesses, that you can take control. So let us hope, let us wish that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the blessing, the smile from above, to assist us in this lifelong experience where life doesn't always smile at us, but that ultimately we know that with Hashem's help we can prevail. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.